I think everyone's at different sessions right now. We're trying to reassemble everyone. But Peter will be here soon. I'm Malaj Chakravarti. I'm the Associate Editor-in-Chief at Aperture Neuro. And I'm joined on the stage by J.B. Pauline, who's the founder of the journal. And Justine Zielkowska is our journal manager. And Peter, I'm sure, will be here very, very shortly. So thank you all for coming. We're going to try to keep this reasonably brief so that you guys can get to your next session and with enough time to spare. But for those of you who don't know, Aperture Neuro is the journal which is founded by JB, but really with the idea of it being the journal for OHBM as a society and to represent the needs and the values that we have as a community. And so we've been in existence for a few years, and I would say our main launch period was last year, just before this meeting, where we shifted to a new platform and hired Justine shortly thereafter as our journal manager, and she's done a great job with all the journal manager initiatives that we've had. So, okay. Are you going to the slides? Sorry. So the goal of this meeting is to talk about the history, mission, and scope of the journal. We'll talk about some of the relaunch updates and what that even means, and some of the numbers and looking ahead for what's going to be happening at Aperture Neuro in the next little while. So just a brief history. Aperture Neuro, like we've heard many, many times over the course of this meeting, is really a grassroots initiative, like many of the initiatives that happen here at OHBM. And it's a creation that was developed through the creation of a OHBM Publishing Initiative Committee. And then this was approved in April 2020. We had our first kind of beta phase launch in October of 2020, which had some problems in terms of the platform and some of the management at that time. And I think some other people in the room here can also attest to starting or restarting a new journal is very hard. And there's a lot of moving parts and moving parts that are tough to account for without actually putting feet on the pavement. So we took a small hiatus to regroup and address some of the issues that we saw in fall 2020. And since July 2023, Aperture has relaunched with a new platform and restructured its editorial team significantly, we think, to make it a little more streamlined. And we'll show you some of the numbers and some of the impact that's had on submissions that we've collected through the journal. So our aim is our mission. Number one, first and foremost, is that we're a scientific journal, and we want to help advance our understanding of the brain. And of course, we want to help understanding in a way that's useful to the OHBM community, and by taking submissions, mainly driven by the OHBM community, to catalyze dissemination of use of novel methods and tools. So we'll talk about this later as well. But there have been a number of categories addressing things that are somewhat the lifeblood of our community, things such as software submissions or pipeline submissions, things that we develop in our labs that we think that could be of use to other people that often go unsighted, but take a significant amount of work, significant amounts of validation, but don't necessarily have DOIs for citations, and increase the impact of brain imaging and assessment on society. So we have a bunch of core values, and I think this is where we potentially differ from a lot of journals that are also available to you. First and foremost, we're low cost. I think the article publishing fees are the lowest that I know of in our community. They're down at $800 a journal, or $800 an article. We're open access, so all papers are publicly available to the community as soon as they're typeset and indexed. We take and value non-traditional research objects, so not just thinking about the standard 10, 12-page PDF, but what are the types of research outputs that you'd like to see be cited, and what's important to you as a community, and how do we facilitate and operate that. You'll find, and probably even within this meeting, there'll be a lot of suggestions on what people would like to see, and those things take time to do well. I would say that we're very interested in expanding the scope of offerings and the types of submissions that we do take. And I think first and foremost, in terms of our interest in the community, is that we're a community-driven journal, and that's a really important facet of what we do. So the scope of submissions, there's a number of them. We have original research articles, review articles, tutorials, conferences and workshop summaries, registered reports, editorials, replication studies, code, data, and notebooks. So it's a strong offering of the types of submissions that can be submitted to the journal, and I think it covers a pretty broad range of the types of submissions that we'd like to see submitted here. We've also streamlined. We previously wanted to be very community-driven and had quite a large editorial team, and we've since streamlined that group to a very nice group of handling editors, which covers a big part of the globe, and a lot of the methodological and scientific ideas that we think we'd like to cover that are relevant to the OHBM community. Naturally, there's always places we can grow. And I think the idea is that this will scale as submissions to the journal scale. And I think that's a really important component to what we can do. But we've been quite agile in this new format, and our ability to handle papers has been really, really excellent in the last little while. You want to take the podium, or do you want me to keep going? You can keep on. Okay. So we've been really happy with the performance of this new team, and it's a well-integrated team. So, if you have any interest or thoughts on how we conduct our editorial work, you're also welcome to contact us. So I'll give a few updates on relaunch, and actually, this is probably a good place, Peter, for you to switch up. Do you want to switch up here? And yeah.
Okay, sorry for coming in late. It's one session to the next. So the relaunch updates. That's interesting. Okay, so how do we do this? Okay, right here. Oh, it is going ahead. Okay, sorry about that. I'm just, all right. So is that the next slide? That's okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. Suddenly this. I'm okay. All right. Great. Perfect. Okay. Okay. So you got the timeline before we initially had a platform that was less useful, wasn't quite ready for prime time, and so we finally got rid of it, and so now. We decided to go with Scholastica, and it's not open source, but it's a nonprofit, and it's streamlined and as mentioned, customizable for peer review. The manuscript production is in either HTML, PDF, XML. It allows open access. So, and we use Authenticate just like with NeuroImage or other journals for plagiarism detection. And with the help of many people, we actually made a new logo. We created a new website, and now we also have we work with a copy editor for the PDF typeset and design and layout. So that's all. Much more, everything has sort of been redone, and Scholastica is a wonderful platform. It's a solid package as far as that's concerned. All right. And it seems that as far as the user experience, the people submitting papers have had a really easy time. And I can say for myself, as far as the editors and the editor-in-chief, it just works. There are some quirks here and there, but like with anything, there's always like that. So it works really well. It allows us to review things quickly, and with high quality. So, okay. Oops. Okay. All right. So what we decided to do as far as the editorial team, the previous version of Aperture had a huge editorial team, and one of I tried to do as much as possible is take my experience from being editor-in-chief of Neuroimage and to try to embody some of the things that worked really well as far as that has been concerned. So we restructured the editorial team to have it smaller so that it stays engaged. I mean, it gives them more work, but it keeps them engaged, which is, I think, the key. We tried to, standardize procedures across the editors. There's rules of thumb, like what do you do? How do you decide the triage of paper? How do you, if you ask 2 reviewers to review, and they have contradictory views, what do you do? And so we try to have that more standardized now across all the editors. As far as development of the publication documents, it's all pretty standardized as well. We're still evolving our code submission guidelines, and this is something that we want to talk about. We have, clear author agreements. That's all pretty much standardized. That's sort of adopted from sort of the mean of like other journals that we've looked at. Indexing, we're submitting this, indexing to DOAJ and the Web of Science, and we're trying to partner with BIDS, Steering Committee, and NeuroLibre as far as enhancing reproducibility standards. Okay. So as far as engagement with the OHBM community, we're trying to increase our social media presence. We're trying to have, sort of bring people to the website. We have a Best Paper Award. And now we have multiple papers to pick from. So it keeps on growing. We are purposely sort of open to publishing papers by all the SIGs and the various committees with OHBM. We're trying to diversify the type of publications that we have, not only in terms of the structure, like the code, like code papers or data papers, but also in terms of the themes. We're more open to editorials or meeting summaries or summaries from the various SIGs. We're willing to look at things. If things are a little bit too, not quite appropriate, we'll let people know, but we're generally open as far as that's concerned. And like for instance, there's a paper on how can we reduce climate costs of OHBM. That was a paper from one of the SIGs that was great as far as that's concerned. At this part, I don't know, Mallard, did you want to jump in with this? One thing to mention in this regard is that we've been working closely with Renzo Huber on this as well. He's been sort of spearheading this, and he's been working with both Mellor and I as far as that's concerned. But yeah, jump in.
So as I mentioned before, I think one of our major emphasis is that a word? One of the things we're really trying to do is give places for publication for tools that are really workhorses of our field. So this year, Chris Roden submitted and published 2 papers, one on NI math and the other one on FSL maths. And I think this is just a great way to actually give these tools a citable place. These are tools that are often used in your workflows, and I think it gives us a place to actually show that they've been looked at and vetted by the community, and it's also method to enhance kind of the popularity of some of these tools and give them a place for visibility. This is also true of the Taylor Salo published this really nice paper on NIMARE, the Neuroimaging Meta-Analysis Research Environment, which is a commonly used tool by the community, but now has a nice citable place for us to be looking at. And then this year's actual Best Paper Award winner was this paper that you see here on the right, A Practical Guide for Generating Reproducible and Programmatic Neuroimaging Visualizations by Sid Chopra, and giving kind of a nice overview of the workflow that he's put together for that type of thing. And these are the types of things that we all struggle with all the time. For example, you submit your paper, it goes into review, the editor-in-chief or reviewer number 2, dreaded reviewer number 2, to always reviewer number 2 wants you to redo all your figures, but with a different color scheme and with the control and the case group in a different ordering, right? And ideally, you'd be able to do that just by programmatically, right? By changing the place of a few variables or the values in a few variables, right? And so code like this and tools like this are things we all need desperately to save us time, but also ensure that what we put into the paper stays in the paper in the way that we intended. So I think things like this are clearly in our future and are clearly in our purview. And so also I think this paper on the right is a really interesting idea of someone thinking a bit outside of the box, right? This is a workflow that was been created within a lab to do this, but it'll benefit several people, several different labs. Here's some other really interesting kind of submissions. So one really great rodent whole brain fMRI data processing toolbox. As someone who works a bit in that space, I can tell you that those are hard to come by, and there are not that many of them that exist, and other Python packages and implementations of a 2D line scan method. So overall, there's a big variety of tools that were submitted for this special initiative. And I think that speaks to people being engaged and wanting to get this stuff out there in a way that's accessible to the community. And I think that's really exciting for us. And so, I would say keep those things coming. I mean, those are things that you have at your fingertips. They're in your labs already. You use them all the time, and you give them to your colleagues and collaborators to use too, right? So I think it'd be nice if it had a DOI and a citable. We think it'd be nice if it had a DOI and citable and reproducible kind of place for it to live. We've seen a lot of editorials on, so Matthew Wall wrote this really great editorial on multi-line acquisition sequences for fMRI, caveats in using kind of, new technologies and some papers kind of eulogizing some really wonderful members of our community like Sean Merritt, who passed away recently, but was, a wonderfully engaged and well-loved figure in the neuroimaging community, and worked closely with Peter throughout much of his career, actually. We've also seen a lot of really great original research. These are just some examples from methodological research like multivariate lesion symptom mapping, different acquisition protocols, and deep learning model work that's been been published in the journal as well. And I think this shows that we're not just kind of looking for, of course we're excited about traditional scientific articles, traditional methodological articles, but a real vast array of the type of things that we think are interesting to the neuroimaging and the OHBM community specifically. I think last but not least, we've had a lot of success in summarizing the types of activities that happen here at OHBM. And so, for example, we recently published a pretty big set of proceedings of the OHBM Brain Hack 2022. And these were still, even though they're the proceedings of the Brain Hack, and if you're familiar with how that works, it's kind of a hodgepodge of different projects that come together in one report. But it was still peer reviewed. We still gave feedback. We still asked for changes to the document. So it's a way of kind of splitting this difference of grassroots organization, but also giving it a bit of relevance by providing the peer review. And I think that was a really exciting initiative for us to get off the ground, and we're hoping that we can support this in the same way in subsequent brain hacks as well. So some of our most cited publications include this one here, which is quantitative streamlines and spectrophy methods and normalization, and evaluating the reliability of human brain white matter tractometry. Those have been really, really well cited. I think they're do you know the numbers offhand, Justine? Above 40 or 50 in 2 years, something like that. So that's, I think that's a really good track record for a journal which is still kind of increasing the number of papers that it's receiving, and hopefully, we see that as a very positive sign. And this year, for the first time, what happened? Is it ready? Is it on the website? Okay. We went through a lot of work to create an abstract book so that you can you don't have to go into basically, so everything would be in like a single PDF and be hosted by the Aperture website team. And then we were promised that any size, there was no size limit to the actual abstract book, and then found out once we were about to upload it that they preferred 60 megs and under, and we were at about 600 megs. So there will be an abstract book. It's ready. We've seen it. It exists, and it's just a question of where we're hosting it in the next little while. But I think, in subsequent years, and again, speaking to an array of things that sometimes you just don't have the answer to when you do them for the first time. This is one of them. Like we've been wanting to do this for some time, and then once we figured out how all the moving parts should come together, there's a little wrinkle, but we have a lot of confidence that next year this abstract book should be available online well before the meeting. Now we know exactly what the pathway is to get it going from the submissions that we all submit and putting them in a book in a form that's searchable and findable and so on. Do you want to take over numbers and looking ahead, Peter? Yeah.
Okay, Aperture by the numbers. Yeah, so the numbers are still growing. So since the relaunch, which was about a year ago, we only had 28 submissions, 27 total publications from the previous iteration. Our acceptance rate is 68%. That's a little high, but I would like to say that there's a lot of good quality papers that have been submitted. And of course, those numbers, I think as people understand how Aperture is unique, what it offers as far as the types of publications, the structure of the publications, I think it will grow hopefully exponentially as far as that's concerned. And that doesn't really, and every single paper that we did accept has been, by our criteria, outstanding paper. So we still keep our standards high. We won't just accept papers to get papers, and never was that an issue. Okay, let's see here. Now, is it working? Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. So, and one thing that was sort of fell off the rails with the previous iteration that we really have under control pretty well now. Very well. Is we have a tight control of the workflow, so that when a submission comes in, it's 40 days until first submission, the first decision. And that actually does mean sending it out to review, bugging the reviewers, and getting it back on average. The final decision depends very much on how long the authors take to make revisions. So that's about 96 days. And then the final publication usually involves either a couple iterations of correcting, and that's about 127 days or 4.1 months. So it's pretty quick. This is about as good as it gets as far as a high quality publication platform is concerned, with 2 iterations, finding reviewers, having corrections and things like that. So total publications by volume, we decided to just divide it into years right now, and so we're still in the process of growing the 2024 volume, and you can see the distribution. Typical, the blue is the typical research, but we're trying to emphasize more code, more conference summaries, more database descriptions, and we would like to actually offer, to have more reviews and foster other, on the website they have the listing of all the other types of categories we promote. So, okay, as far as total article views, it's becoming more and more active. Since post-relaunch, there's 26,000 article views, and that's a good sign. And this is just a listing of the top viewed articles, and these are things that are I don't necessarily need to go through all of them, but they are a nice mix of original research, some code paper, some paper on MR sequences and acquisition, and also editorials and surveys and things like that. So it's actually a nice mix, and they're all pretty highly viewed. So looking ahead, so yeah, I don't know if you want to jump back in here, or I can just keep on going. Or you can, okay, all right, either way. We can both, So we have an open science special issue. Looking at open data sets, we're proposing that people submit papers relating to open data sets. Looking at the impact, infrastructure, and governance. And this is in collaboration with the Open Science Special Interest Group. And the GIST editors will Andrea Gondova, Yiju Lee, Selma Linklemeyer, Stefano Moya, and Subapraya Sobaya, and Juchi Yu. So that's actually, these are things that we're trying to do to foster more focus on open data sets and other structures for publications. All right, conference proceeding platform. So as was mentioned, so we're trying to, we've knocked around the idea along, sort of catalyzed by our offer to create a conference, or all the abstracts in our book, is that it might be a good idea to create a separate platform within the within the journal for hosting other conference sort of content. So if for instance, if there's other workshops or related to OHBM or workshops related to ISMRM that, or any other conference where they don't have a platform for their content, we're open to hosting that. And then the idea then is to have a separate web page within the journal website that actually hosts this. And there would be some form of a publication associated with those. So right now with our abstract book, that's a special issue. It'll be marked as a special issue, but it's a publication with all the abstracts that will just be there. So, and that's still in the process. So looking ahead, obviously it's the standard things. We're trying to increase submissions, improve indexing, and obviously the impact factor. We'd like to get an impact factor. That takes a little bit of time. We want to improve the integration with other OHBM initiatives, like integration with the SIGs, integration with the abstract book, integration with the hackathons, the creation of the code. So we're always looking for that, and we're also looking to sort of modify. We had an oversight committee that was, I'd look at it as something like an infrastructure, sort of a skeletal infrastructure for building. As you're building a building, you have to have this, scaffolding, and as the building is growing up, then the scaffolding can sort of fall away. But we still need. So most of our decisions right now have been made sort of internally by our editors now in terms of policies and workflow. But we've been very much reliant on the Aperture Oversight Committee, and I still think we want to keep that to some degree, a few people in place to sort of have an interface with council and be able to offer advice or communication with council. And in that sense, it would be a non-voting representation on council. We'd also like to foster, other initiatives, like a state of brain imaging review article for invited authors every single year. And that could either be a conference summary for OHBM, or it could just be sort of a state of, what's the state of the field of neuroimaging? And that could be like a regular thing that we invite authors to do. So we have many other sort of directions in which we want to go. So at this point, we open up the discussion. We'd like to hear from you. What's your experience with submissions and the peer review system for those of you who have submitted to Aperture? Any feedback on the code initiative, or even regarding publishing in non-traditional research objects? There's a lot of challenges, or future directions, outreach, and growth. Steve.
Great work. Thanks, guys. So you have both used both Scholastica and Editorial Manager. What's your feeling about the relative pros and cons? Because until you've used something, you really don't know. So it's very valuable to have experience from both of you on that.
Yeah. So I think that most of the stuff that we perceive that's good or bad is sort of imperceptible to the people submitting. Like, it's from the editor standpoint. Like, for instance, I thought with NeuroImage, we had an amazing way of tracking and inviting reviewers. And there's a huge database that was just great. With Scholastica, it's a little bit more. It's not quite established yet. It's there. There's a database that's growing, but it's not quite as built out as with NeuroImage. Other things. One thing actually that I find initially was awkward with NeuroImage. There was with the workflow, there was the papers, once it was decided on by a handling editor, it was passed up to the senior editor. That was all very clear. It was all on your dashboard. Whereas here, there's sort of like to-dos. There's sort of like a little bit more quirky things like to-dos and whatever, but it still works. It still works. One actually really nice thing that NeuroImage didn't have that I'm using more and more within this Scholastica website is you can start discussions related to a paper. So it's a separate discussion platform that's linked to the paper that all the editors can say, hey, what about this? And so it's all saved as opposed to email or whatever. I don't know, Mallory, do you?
I think that last one is a huge one, is that you keep a record of, sometimes, this happens in imaging neuroscience or other journals too. Like a lot of the discussion happens on the back end via email, but in this case, it's all transparent for everyone to see, and you don't lose kind of, conversations that, well, I spoke with this part of the editorial team, and then I'm going to funnel it back to this part of the editorial team, and so there's a continuity in that conversation that lives on the website, and that's actually really, really nice. The other stuff, I think it's a work in progress. As our database grows, it'll be easier to invite reviewers. I think assigning papers to different reviewers is actually, or editors, sorry, is quite easy in this workflow. It's like everything is, once you get used to it, it's pretty seamless. I've enjoyed using it.
Can I ask you, Steve, what's your experience with the MIT Press?
Well, that's a very different question. I was talking about the paper handling platform. So we use Editorial Manager, which we also used to use at NeuroImage. And it's just very powerful. It has its flaws, but it's very powerful and effective. But unfortunately, it's not free. Our experience with MIT Press as a publisher has been absolutely fantastic. Just not a single complaint. Just wonderful to work with and efficient.
I will say the cost of this compared to EM is a lot lower, and the quality for price ratio, I think, absolves us from any issues that we might have about, the things we don't like a little bit kind of thing.
Yeah, I think this platform really gets us close to EM as far as, and in some ways better, in some ways close in terms of the reviewers, but yeah, the cost is probably much less. I don't know exactly how much EM is, but yeah.
Hi again. I have my comments. Do you consider special issues? This is the first question. I would suggest also to have some sort of research collaboration platform where researchers open for collaboration. They just, display it on the website of the journal. Would you consider educational papers?
Yep.
Probably. I've always wanted to have a response towards a paper on a journal, but I don't want to contact directly the authors, just some sort of response to put it there for publicly, everyone can read it. Would this be possible on Aperture? And thank you.
What do you mean by that? Like
I mean response, like when you open the paper on a journal, you will see the website of the paper. Would you have some sort of comments allowed for people who are registered already in the journal? Thank you.
Yeah, we actually discussed that. And it's certainly not off the table, but right, I mean, someone would have to moderate that, and in principle, it's a great idea. I like having this discussion, just, sort of people making comments, and it would be great to sort of, sort of enhances the review process too, but it's really hard to spend the time to stay focused on it enough that there's not, emotive comments or bad discussions or things like that to take them off. That would just be a full-time job, or maybe a part-time job, but still, you'd have to attend to that, which is difficult. But yeah, I like the idea though. I'd love to figure out how to do it with automated sort of way, some sort of filter or something like that. But anyway, yeah.
Hi, Peter. So I have a very different question. So I know your APC is very low, around $1,000 or something. So I am in a very unique situation. So I have access to about 400 clinical good participant data. It's already analyzed, and it's at the publishable stage. But the problem is my previous institute, data is from them, right? So they said because I'm not affiliated with them, so if I publish, they won't be able to pay the APC. And my current institute, they said because the data doesn't belong to them, so they don't pay for the APC. So do you have any recommendation, or any suggestions related to this journal or any other journal? How can we publish this type of,
So how do you publish the?
how to pay the fees, journal fees in that case?
Well, I mean, we have data papers. We have data papers where you have a descriptor of the data, and the data resides somewhere. Initially we were sort of ambitious. We thought, okay, let's maybe have a database. But if your data resides somewhere, I mean, you could actually write a data descriptor paper, and just publish it right here. It's a very simple sort of formula as far as that's concerned. And then you could always refer to that data descriptor paper when you use the data anywhere.
Okay.
But I think your question is, how do I pay the fees when I don't have money to
pay
pay
the fees, because both the institutes are not willing to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is probably a question that we can't answer right here. We'd probably
Okay.
need to. I mean, feel free to email our journal manager. I'm
Okay.
sure Justine can route this in the right direction, and we'd be happy to discuss.
Yeah,
it
we could talk more
and
about
see if we
Okay.
can help. Yeah.
Thank you.
But presumably you have waivers for certain countries, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And reduced fees are possible. It's just a question of,
Yeah. Yep.
I don't think it's a question I can, and it's a decision I can make out in the open though.
But getting that exactly right, like finding specifically the waiver for the specific country, it might be, labs within the country is still, it's still a work in progress as far as that's concerned. Yeah, we're looking to imaging neuroscience to set a standard for that sort of thing too, but yeah.
I apologize if you touched on this, but I had a question regarding, suppose you publish a paper somewhere, anywhere, it doesn't matter, but that journal doesn't allow for publishing code. Do you welcome a separate entry into Aperture Neuro with just the code, just the description of the code? Or does the original article also have to come to you?
Well, it depends on what if the original article is about the code, that seems like they should be linked as far as that's concerned. But if the original article is using the code in some way and they refer to the code, yeah, we would welcome articles just about the code.
Okay.
So
I mean, normally we don't really publish articles about code. Like, for example, in MRM, you don't, or neuroimage.
right, yeah,
So
exactly.
usually you describe your methods in some length, but you don't really put up the code.
Right. So
You
you're saying
do
that-
some
so
sort of
we-
GitHub or
so
something.
yeah, so we don't. So right. I mean, so papers that come in here, we actually, the code hopefully is sitting in GitHub or sitting at Nitric or wherever, and then you write the paper to describing the code as well as possible. At least that's the version that there's different versions of that, but I think that's what I had in mind as far as that's concerned. That's what we had. I mean, I don't know if you want to add to that.
That's exactly right. I don't know if I have much to add there. Yeah. But I think, the easiest, I mean, again, I think if you have concerns about a specific use case or a specific submission, we're very responsive in terms of trying to work with you to find out if there's a fit there, and and can we make a fit for you, and we'd be happy.
Maybe I can give a specific example. We're trying to publish a paper now, and we have a previous publication where the method is somewhat described. We refer to that publication, but in the current review process, they said, well, in that paper, it's not in detail described, so can you describe it a little more here? So it'd be nice if somewhere the whole method could be just put up, and then we could refer to it in all future publications. And like historically, articles are not made for this, where you can really in detail describe every step of what you do.
And what you
that's
say
what
is
I meant.
exactly what we want to, I mean, that's exactly where we want to differentiate Aperture. I mean, Aperture's, it welcomes all these other types of papers, but specifically we also, would welcome, there's a value to that. I mean, it helps propagate the code. If you have a really good paper about the code that you can, like you said, just refer to, and whenever you use the code, you use that paper as a reference, and you're done.
So I said code as a sort of umbrella term, but there are a lot of things that go into an experiment, like how you set up the participant, how you use the cushions. So there's a lot of experimental detail that never goes anywhere in an article, and that's also what I meant. Like more a methods paper of how we acquired this amazing data, what kind of tweaks we made, how we built the coil that was not published, but we use it, and
That's actually
these are the things I
interesting.
meant.
That actually,
So we have a sample submission like that right now. It's a bit close to me because it's by some close colleagues of mine, but it's about how to do postmortem imaging and all the secret sauce that goes into that, and that's been, and that's basically that kind of a step-by-step type of work, and
yeah, I guess that's sort of code in itself. I mean, it's sort of like a procedure. It just happens to be, experimental procedures. And the more we can, and I imagine that the more it could be generalized. I mean, certainly there's all these specific aspects, but the more it could be generally useful, is the more likely that we would, we would accept it, because it's, but that certainly we would include that.
Okay, I'm just asking because it also goes a long way along reproducible science, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, is there anything different about your review system? So it seems like you have a more diversified categories. So does it mean that if you're allocated papers to review, are they assigned to different categories, especially things like code review or checking for the integrity of data that has been shared? Like, do these things add to the review time, and how do you deal with this in your review system?
Are you asking, are there like different types of reviewed for code papers or for different categories? Well, right now it's it's a standard thing where we have a paper, we determine who would be most appropriate for reviewing it. We ask anywhere from 3 to 5 people, and then usually about 2 or 3 accept, and then we give them what is it now, like a couple weeks. So that's pretty much it. I don't know if that was your question.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, yeah.
Yeah, there's other potential models for reviewing. One is sort of to flip it and to open it up for people to review, but right now it's pretty much sort of traditional. And we're open to change that, but right now we just want to get things up and running where you have the editor. They sort of, so if I get a paper, so usually the editor-in-chief gets a paper, they look at it, they decide what editor is most appropriate for the paper. So then they pass it off to the editor, and then the editor sort of takes it and decides what reviewers would be best to review. And then the process goes from there. It's pretty much standard process that's like most other journals in the field. So.
Is PubMed coming, or is that not an option?
it's coming, but it's an option. It is an option. We will make the application. It's just, time is a factor, is all.
Yep.
I think because people have to get to their next session, it's probably a good time to close the meeting, and I'll let you do that in a second. But I just wanted to thank Justine Gilkowska, who's sitting over there, who's our journal manager, She put all the slides together. She got all the swag set up for us up here. So feel free to take some before you go. Rep your Aperture Neuro t-shirt proudly. And thank you all for taking the time to come and be part of this. And like I said, we're extremely open to feedback of any, good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. So please don't hesitate to send that our way, and I'll pass it off to Peter to close
Yeah,
out.
no, actually, also, I mean, it's very much, we're very happy that we're stable right now, and we sort of resemble a traditional journal. We're very much open to new ideas in directions to go. And we have a system set up that can handle many more papers than what we're doing now. So now might be a good time to apply. You have all the editors' full attention, and we're very motivated to get high quality work out quickly as well as possible. So yeah, any suggestions as well as far as workflow, topics, there's probably things we haven't thought about. So we're always open to that. Either Mel or myself or Justine could receive your emails as far as that's concerned. So, great. All right, thank you. And the last one right there, you can